If you knew my story, you'd have a hard time believing me. You'd think I was lying. Joy and sorrow never last. I'll die trying not to live in the past. 2, 3. If you knew my story, my heaven and my hell, if you knew my story, you'd have a good story to tell. I left my clothes on that cold river rock, my cares and my woes rolled up in my socks. I lay down in that mountain stream and the icy waters rushed over me. If you knew my story, my heaven and my hell, if you knew my story, you'd have a good story to tell me. I'm not alone. Tell me I'm not alone. Many backs have broken from lesser weight, I know. I was born to carry more than I could hold. Even though I stumble, even though I fall, you'll never see me tumble, you'll never see me crawl. If you knew my story, through the water from the well, if you knew my story, you'd have a good story to tell me. I'm not alone. Tell me I'm not alone. Even though I stumble, even though I fall, you'll never see me crumble, you'll never see me crawl. If you knew my story.
Okay, we're going to have a lot of mic moving today because Cathy's taller than I am. Does this work? Can you hear me? Raise your hand if you can't hear me. Can't put it too low or it'll go pop. How's that? Peter Piper. All right. Okay? All right. Welcome. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Buffalo, and welcome to all of you out there on YouTube. I was going to say Zoom, but it's not Zoom anymore. Whoever you are, wherever you came from, old or young, rich or poor, gay or straight or whatever, whether you have come from whatever your ethnicity or whatever your background, you are welcome here. Whether you have been here longer than you can remember, or this is maybe the first time you've come through our doors, or anything in between, you're welcome here. We are blessed to be here together, to share truths, stories, and spirituality in this beautiful place, a place which has been the site of human gatherings for many thousands of years. We meet on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee people, and we wish to honor the ancestral guardians of this land and its waterways. Today, many indigenous people continue to call this land home and act as its stewards. May we remember that responsibility, that the responsibility to share and care for this land extends to all people, so this territory may be a healthy home for generations to come. My name is Fran Manley. I am serving as this morning's worship associate, And I am pleased on behalf of all of us to welcome into our pulpit our new interim minister, the Reverend Cathy Harrington. Excellent. This month's theme is welcome, and you just did it. Cathy's been among us since the beginning of August, and so many of you have met her already before and after our Sunday services, at your committee and ministry team meetings, and in private conversations. Her sermon today, which we're calling sort of a soft opening because it is, after all, Labor Day weekend. The grand opening will come over the next couple of weeks. Her sermon today shares something of the long journey that brought her to Buffalo and into our pulpit. So welcome, Cathy. There will be a meeting with Cathy, not a formal meeting, but there will be a Q&A with Cathy right here in the sanctuary right after the service. So if you want to find out, some of you have been through interim ministries before, some of you have been through a number of interim ministries before, some of you have never been through an interim ministry before. So if you have questions about interim ministry or about Cathy or whatever, just stay for a while after the service. You might gather up near the front and talk to Cathy. There's a lot of announcements this morning because it's fall and we're almost fall and things are gearing up. So let's go. Next Sunday is our annual ingathering service celebrating the beginning of a new church year. Not that anything ever stopped. Remember to bring a little bit of water that comes from or symbolizes a place that was important to you or an event that was important to you to join in our water communion next week. Tuesday morning coffee klotz continues Tuesday mornings, 10 to 11 a.m. Paul Zanoli hosts that. Our marvelous music director, Dr. Jessie Downs, and her husband, Dr. Alex Huddleston, are offering a course in Musicianship 101 for anyone who would like to understand more about how does music work, especially the music we sing together. How can we participate better in whatever is going on? You can find more information about that in the insert in your order of service and in the e-blast, or just grab Jessie after the service and talk to her. They're hoping to start the class this Wednesday evening, and they only need 2 more people to have a quorum. So if you're interested, sign up right away. And if you're in need of some scholarship funds, talk to Reverend Cathy, and she might be able to come up with something for you. Also starting this week is Michael Harris's new class. How many Michael Harris fans out here? Yeah, okay. And Michael will tell you all about that.
Well, I've been giving courses about music and theater at this church for many years. My newest one starts on Wednesday morning, September 6th at 9:30 a.m. It's a Zoom class. It runs 14 weekly sessions. It's called 2 Hearts in 3/4 Time, the world of operetta. For a century, operetta was the mass audience musical theater form, and its sole purpose was to entertain and delight. The operetta world was one of high romance, witty satire, and extravagant fantasy, and it all seemed to flow to an elegant triple time rhythm. Boy meets girl, they take a twirl in 3/4 time. Kings and queens glide through their scenes in 3/4 time, while the waltz is whirling, passions start to climb. Heed the call, come join the ball in 3/4 time. The operetta style has power to beguile with melodies of gold that sing of joy and days of old. While some comedy relief can help us chase away our grief, each lover finds a friend, their happy end. Victor Herbert, Rudolf Frimmel, Johann Strauss, Marietta, Rosemary, and Fledermaus, Offenbach and Lehar, harmony sublime, hearts that beat the music sweet in 3/4 time. Join the fun, and you can see me in the parish hall after the service. Thank you.
One more announcement. The grief group meets next Sunday at noon in the Gardner Room. See Bonnie Collins. There's Bonnie, you're short. Stand up, please. Stand up so people can see you. Okay, thank you. See Bonnie Collins for more information about that. And if that's not enough, the insert in your order of service has a whole lot more stuff. Stuff you can do, ways you can help, all kinds of stuff. So make sure you take that home with you so you can read it very, very carefully and don't miss anything. Let's take a few minutes now to celebrate and deepen the community, which is our beloved congregation, by greeting our neighbors. It's a great time to welcome somebody new to the congregation, or just somebody you haven't met yet. We'll give them a minute or two, a couple minutes, not too long. Well, I don't know. This is coffee hours for them. Oh, no, but he does it, but there's something where he does these promos. Like the choir has a big deal on the brother song. I know. Huh? Well, you know, John was of the opinion that someone should have but that was her. Well, okay. I'm not going to rock the boat yet. Actually, you do the call to worship, so we'll hold this up. We ready? Shall we? Just hold it near the mic, and then it really gets to hear it.
I'll speak into it. Good morning. I'm so happy to be here and honored to be serving as your interim minister while we go through this transition time together. My sermon this morning is a lot of story. It's a lot of life, because I've had a lot of life. And it's not the whole story. So if you want the full story, you'll have to come back next week and the week after and the week after, because I tell a lot of stories in my sermons. One of my favorite ministers who writes amazing opening words is Reverend Gretchen Haley. She wrote these words: "Grace meets us where we are." There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship. No eternal optimism or clarity of conviction. No boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to even know what brought you here or how you will solve that problem you are turning over and over again in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be perfect, or even halfway perfect, to belong in this circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it found us. Where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us, and this day anew once again. Come, let us worship together.
Please rise in body or spirit as we say together the words for lighting our chalice. We gather in loving community, creating a shared vision of compassion and dignity for all, to radically transform the world in which we live. And now, please remain standing as we sing hymn number 194 in your gray hymnal.
And before we sing, this is not a super familiar hymn for our congregation, I don't think. It's really beautiful, though. And I just want to remind you that this is a safe space to lift up your voice, even if you don't feel super comfortable using it. But because this is kind of new to our congregation, the soloists are going to sing through the first verse one time so you can hear it. And then we will sing the first verse again with all of you. So you get a chance to kind of just hear how it goes. So, Chris.
May this thread I
That's the first time I've ever sung that song. It's beautiful. I love the words. They are beautiful. So I have a story for you, and unfortunately you can't see the beautiful illustrations. It's by Rabbi Sandy Eisenberg Sasso, called In God's Name. In the beginning, she has an epigraph. The voice of God is in the uniqueness of each and every person. So after God created the world, all the living things on earth were given a name. The plants and the trees, the animals and the fish, and each person, young and old, has a special name. But no one knew the name for God. So each person searched for the name for God's name. The farmer whose skin was dark like rich brown earth, from which all things grew, called God source of life. These pictures, I can't see them. The girl whose skin was golden as the sun that turned night into day, called God creator of light. The man who tended the sheep in the valley, called God shepherd. The tired soldier who fought too many wars, called God maker of peace. And the artist who carved figures from the earth's hard stone, called God my rock. Sometimes the people who called God by different names were puzzled. They said every single living thing has a single name. The marigold, the pansy, the lily, the oak tree, the sequoia, and the pine. God must have a single name that is greater and more wonderful than all other names. Well, each person thought that their name for God was the greatest, and each person thought that her name for God was the very best. And the farmer who called Source of Life said, "This is the true name for God." And the girl who called God Creator of Light insisted, "This is the most splendid name for God." And the shepherd, the soldier, the artist, they all believed that they had the perfect name for God. But no one listened, least of all, God. So each person kept searching for God's name. The woman who cared for the sick called God Healer. And the slave who was freed from bondage called God Redeemer. The grandfather whose hair was as white with the years as snow called God Ancient One. And the grandmother bent with age and sorrow called God Comforter. The young woman who nursed her newborn son called God Mother. And the young man who held his baby daughter called God Father. And the child who was lonely called God Friend. All the people called God different names, but they tried to tell one another that their name was the best name for God and the only name, and that all the other names were wrong. But no one listened, least of all, God. And so each person kept searching for God's name. And then the people who called God Ancient One, Friend, Mother, Father, all the people who gathered, who called God by a different name, came together and they knelt by a lake that was clear and quiet like a mirror, God's mirror. Each person who had a name for God looked at the others who had different names. They looked into God's mirror and saw their own faces and the faces of all the others. And they called out their names for God: Source of Life, Creator of Lights, Shepherd, Maker of Peace, my Rock, Healer, Redeemer, Ancient One, Mother, Father, Friend, all at the same time. And in that moment, the people knew that all the names for God were good, and no name was better than another. And then all at once, their voices came together, and they called God One. And everyone listened, most of all, God. Okay.
Each week, we take a good portion of our Sunday offering and give it away to a social justice cause outside our church walls. This month, we're supporting the good work of Fantastic Friends of Western New York, a nonprofit volunteer-driven social organization for individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. Teens and adults have a great time at events and programs, socializing and making friends, while parents are able to enjoy respite or socialize with other parents during programs. Let's be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all who share their gifts with us, for we are enriched by their giving. Let us be grateful even for our needs, so that we may learn from the generosity of others. In the spirit of gratitude and generosity, let us now receive our morning offering.
As cloudy as I'd been the night before, and I went in seeking clarity. I went to the doctor, I went to the mountains, I looked to the children, I drank from the fountains. We go to the doctor, we go to the mountains, we look to the children, we drink from the fountain. Yeah, we go to the Bible, we go through the workout, we read up on revival, we
A reading this morning is called A Theology Adequate for the Night by Nancy Schaefer. Not God as unmoved mover, one who set the earth in motion and withdrew. Not the one to thank when those cherished do not die, for providence includes equally power to harm. Not a God of exactings, as if love could be earned or subtracted. But this may work in the night, something that breathes with us as others sleep, something that breathes also those sleeping, so no one is alone, something that is the beginning of love, and also each part of how love is completed. Something so large, wherever we are, we're not separate, which teaches again the way to start over. Night is the test, when grief lies uncovered and longing shows clear, when nothing we do can hasten the earth's turning or delay it. This may be adequate for the night, this holding, something that steadfastly breathes us, which we also are learning to breathe.
In the center of our service and in the center of our lives, let us pause to honor the silences of the world. Let us open our hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. I want to share with you these words also by the late Nancy Schaefer, who believed that the poems that she wrote came to her as a gift. This one is called In Stillness. I have been looking for the words that come before words, the ones older than silence, the ones not mine, that can't be found by thought, the ones that hold the beginning of the world, that are never used up, which arrive loned and make me weep. This morning, we especially hold in our hearts today Doug Sherman, who's recovering in the hospital from surgery, cancer surgery, and we wish him a speedy recovery. We also hold the victims of Hurricane Idalia and so many other people whose lives have been disrupted by climate change. Let us share a moment of silence. I invite you now to share in this sacred space the names of loved ones that we hold close in our hearts this morning, some suffering in sorrow and some celebrating in joy.
The victims of gun violence.
The breath of nature is upon us, the spirit of life is within us, and the community of love is around us. So be it, blessed be, and let the church say, Amen.
I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Who is like you, O Lord, among the celestials? Who is like you, majestic in holiness? In your love, you lead the people you redeemed. nights we've prayed, with no proof anyone could hear. In our hearts a hopeful song we barely understood. Now we are not afraid, although we know there's much to fear. We were moving mountains long before we knew we could. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you believe. In this time of fear, when prayer so often proved in vain, hope seemed like the summer birds too swiftly flown away. Yet now I'm standing here with heart so full I can't explain, seeking faith and speaking words I never thought I'd say. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. You will when you believe. Hashira l'Adonai ki gaoga. Ashira l'Adonai ki gaoga. Mi hamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nachita v'chastecha am zugealta. Nachita v'chastecha am zugealta. Ashira, Ashira, Ashira. Ashira l'Adonai ki gaoga. Ashira l'Adonai ki gaoga. Mi hamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi hamocha nedar ba'kodesh. Nachita v'chastecha am zugealta. Nachita v'chastecha am zugealta. Ashira, Ashira, Ashira. There can be miracles when you believe. Though hope is frail, it's hard to kill. Who knows what miracles you can achieve? When you believe, somehow you will. Now you will. You will when you believe. You will when you believe.
Wow, that was a better sermon than I could ever give, Michael. hard act to follow. So like many of you, I was not raised in the Unitarian Universalist church. So I'm going to introduce myself to you by sharing some of my stories that led me to seek, question, doubt, and ultimately find a faith and a path where I felt at home. So I'll start at the beginning. I had what you might call an idyllic childhood. We weren't rich, but we were definitely privileged. I was the youngest of 4, and my dad was my hero. He was handsome, funny, smart, and crazy about us kids. He made us feel like we were the most important people in his life. His presence was powerful, larger than life, and my memories are vivid, even though he was away from home a lot, traveling for work. He had twin degrees in engineering from Purdue, chemical and mechanical, and after working for others for so many decades, he started his own consulting firm. And when I was around 12, he bought an airplane, a twin-engine airplane for business trips, and I got to ride co-pilot when the plane wasn't full. I remember when Hurricane Camille devastated so many towns, my father flew Red Cross supplies into Louisiana. He loved to surprise us on Saturday mornings for adventures, and one of my favorite memories is going to Coney Island in Cincinnati. He would purchase a mile-long string of ride tickets and wave them over his head like this, and he'd yell, "Charge!" and his 4 little kids would run after him. The Shooting Star was our favorite, the father of the beast, as it was called, a pre-1971 roller coaster, which of course meant it was more thrilling than our safer versions today. I still remember how my heart would pound and we would hold our hands up in the air, just like this. And I did it only because I didn't want to be made fun of by my older siblings, because I was terrified. It was really great fun, and we would be like, breathless, and then we'd just get back in line again and do it over and over again. We were taken to Christian Science Sunday school as young children, but not consistently. Just enough, probably, to pacify my grandmother, my father's mother, who was kind of stern and a devout Christian Scientist. I was taught in Christian Science that God is love. And I remember reciting the Lord's Prayer, but I don't remember much else, except that I do remember that God was a teacher, a spiritual guide. He was never presented to me as God, which is why I didn't fit in traditional Christian churches. Although I searched and I didn't understand why, it was a Unitarian theology, which I didn't figure out until I went to seminary. Our religious education actually came more from example than formal training. We were taught to be honest and fair and loving and not speak ill of others. We didn't attend church very often, but we did. My parents used God language. My stay-at-home mother filled the house with the smell of fresh baked bread and homemade cookies, and she carried breakfast in bed on a tray to my father for over 30 years, so he could watch the Today Show before he went to work. She'd send us off to school wearing lovely dresses. Sometimes she would make them. She would make matching dresses. With 2 older sisters, I had to outgrow a dress 3 times. I was so glad when I got too big that I couldn't. They were shorter than me, and I got my own clothes. We had petticoats and stride-right shoes and lace socks, and I rarely came home with my braids intact, and my lace anklets were filthy, sort of, tucked into my shoes. But my mother never gave up on me. She would read to us every night, Winnie the Pooh mostly. The implicit messages of gender inequality were always there, however. I was born in 1951. My brother graduated from college. My father bought him a ticket around the world, and he gathered us children all together and said, "This is the kind of gift trip that could only be given to a son." My sister understood that to mean girls wouldn't be safe traveling alone. I took it to mean I'm not worthy of my father's, gift. I learned later and was much disappointed when I found out my father had been having affairs for years. My mother suffered silently, but there were times when her anger erupted. I remember them vividly. One time, my father's father, he was a widower. My grandmother died when I was 12, and he remarried, and his wife was into ceramics. And they would always bring a new ceramic gift, which my mother would try to hide. But there was this one, there was a frog on a lily pad. So one morning, my mother got that frog on the lily pad and walked into the bedroom where Daddy was, lording over his breakfast. And she hoisted it up overhead, and she slammed it down on the floor, and it shattered into pieces. And I think maybe that was a moment when I remember, which gave me the courage later to leave a marriage that wasn't healthy. Divorce was shameful then. When I was in first grade, I witnessed the almost daily paddling of a disabled young African-American boy in my class. He was disruptive. That was the age when they mainstreamed all the children, and they would just hold them back until they were aged out. But even with my immature 6-year-old understanding, I knew there was something wrong with this, that he wasn't disruptive. He didn't deserve to be punished. My eyes would blur with tears every time the principal would come to the door and call his name. I felt bad that I couldn't stand on my desk and scream, "Stop." And my father's words, which he would always say to us, the Father didn't make a mistake when he made that person. The Father didn't make a mistake when he made your friend who you were just saying ugly things about. And I thought, the Father didn't make a mistake when he made Robert. This was the God language that we were given. When I was 9 years old, one of my father's colleagues, his wife gave birth to a baby with Down syndrome. There was whispering in the house. She was older. These things happen. They whisked that baby off to a home. His mother never held him. She never saw him. I felt so heartbroken for that mother with empty arms and the baby. Did he feel sad and scared? Would anybody love him? I remember like yesterday the stark sense of insecurity that I felt with the realization that I was living in a world where the adults could not be trusted, a world where babies were discarded just because they didn't meet our expectations. What about God? What about this promise my father made that the Father doesn't make mistakes? Dad took us on vacations a lot. We went to Tarpon Springs one summer for a 2-week vacation of deep sea fishing, and we stopped in a small town in Georgia for lunch and gas. That was when I was exposed to the ugliness of segregation. Having never witnessed this kind of prejudice, I was confused and shocked. And now it appeared that the God that I learned in Sunday school was love, not only couldn't prevent babies from being discarded, but he also could not prevent hate or evil. I could not be safe around the adults who were running things. When I was a junior in high school, my best friend's big brother, Stevie Wamsley, was killed in a car accident. He was in the passenger seat in the front seat and thrown through the windshield before seatbelts. They had been drinking. Stevie barely survived. He suffered a severe brain injury and was institutionalized for the rest of his life. I mustered the courage to go visit him, and he always recognized me. But it was so unfair. It was so heartbreaking. My faith in that loving, all-powerful God was disappearing rapidly. So our idyllic family began to fall apart in my teens. My parents' personal and financial situation grew fragile and tense. 3 children in college added to the pressure, and finally I was the only child living at home. We lived in a 100-year-old house with 3 stories, and the second story with 4 bedrooms. My father labeled it kids' country. They worked late almost every night. My mother worked for my father as his secretary, and my memories of these times were lonely and depressing and dark. And I wound up being the only child out of 4 who didn't go to college because I married my high school sweetheart at age 17. I couldn't attend my high school graduation because my 7-month pregnancy was impossible to hide. And even if they had allowed me to attend, which they wouldn't, I was too filled with shame to show up. My parents were wonderfully supportive. Thank goodness. They never stopped loving me, and when my son was born 12 days after my 18th birthday, back in that day when visiting hours in the hospital were limited, like 2 hours, they forgot to visit me. They were down at the nursery waving, "Hey, baby Paul." When they finally showed up in the last 5 minutes, I was in tears. I was still a baby myself. My mom decided to quit working and be a full-time grandmother. And because my new mother-in-law owned 4 beauty salons, it seemed logical that I would go to beauty school. After all, I did cut all the hair off my sister's dolls when they were in school when I was 4. It seemed to be my calling. I needed to help to support my family too, but you know, the stigma that is attached, or was attached, I think it's better, to the hairdressers is really ugly and wrong. Hairdressers are generally portrayed in the media, not portrayed as they are, which is creative, intelligent, compassionate, caring. They are all of those things and more. So here I was, my teenage marriage was a mess, but I did my best to tough it out because it was shameful enough to have to get married. Divorce would be the ultimate humiliation and embarrassment for my family. But shame lurked beneath the surface of my being and always resurfaced when I would run into someone I knew. I resonated so much with the character in Barbara Kingsolver's book, The Poisonwood Bible, when she said, "I was lined on the inside with shame like a badly wallpapered bathroom." I just couldn't get past it. 4 years later, with my second child on the way, I was working part-time in one of my mother-in-law's salons, and I had a client whose child was severely disabled. And when she would bring her for a haircut, I would be literally sick to my stomach. Her daughter resisted every effort I made. She would scream and cry, and her mother would have to hold her down, and sometimes she would throw up. I was in awe of this mother whose entire life was consumed with caring and loving this child. I was ashamed of my feelings that I felt repulsed by her. And I thought, would God punish me? What would happen if my baby was born with disabilities? After enduring several unhappy years, I mustered the courage to end my teenage marriage, and I became a single parent. I was fiercely independent. My quest in life, besides survival, was to raise my children to be good citizens of the world and to earn my keep in the world. I worried constantly, though. Excuse me. There were no guarantees that being born healthy, that your children will remain healthy. Around this time, there was a grieving mother who formed the organization Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And it occurred to me that so many people who've met tragedy are moved to make a difference, to do something to serve the world. And it occurred to me that I could bypass the tragedy by moving to service first, sort of like leaving out the middleman. I would go and do some service work. So when the opportunity presented itself, I was ready. I was a hairdresser, and I had a client with another disabled child who was in her 30s. She was living in a home in Witten Center, called Witten Center in South Carolina. And her mother asked me to go to Witten Center and to help with a Christmas party they were doing for the residents and to cut Cathy's hair first. But I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The Parents Club consisted mainly of a handful of dedicated parents who sponsored the party. Most of the residents had no one to visit them, or their parents were gone, or they didn't care. Cathy was a lucky one. The range of disabilities was tremendous, and most of the residents attending this party were over 35, and many were in wheelchairs. A country band that wasn't so great played music, And those who could danced and had an absolutely wonderful time. And Santa Claus came and passed out gifts. And many of the residents that were high functioning and outgoing, I noticed, had Down syndrome. My thoughts raced back to that mother's empty arms and that baby sent away. We know now Down syndrome is just a genetic condition where a person is born with an extra copy of chromosome 21. This can affect how their brain and body develop, but people diagnosed with Down syndrome have happy and healthy lives with supportive care. Looking back, I'm aware that we who are temporarily abled have committed some human rights violations over the years. So I busied myself at the party, still feeling very nervous, but also feeling a little righteous. You know, here I was donating my time, giving food, pouring Coke. But I didn't look at them. I avoided looking at them. I was pouring soda for a disabled man who held out his glass to be filled with crooked fingers, and I was compelled to look at him, to see him. I was immediately drawn to these amazing, brilliant blue eyes. Physically, he was a sight. He hadn't shaven in days. His white hair was disheveled. His sweet smile revealed crooked teeth with remnants of cake and things in his teeth. Yet I was mesmerized, and my fear just melted away. I felt myself sinking into those deep blue eyes, and that sort of felt like love and peace. I had stepped outside of my comfort zone, and my perception had shifted. And I thought, had I seen the eyes of God? I was sure I had seen the eyes of God all the way home. My heart was racing, and I was so transformed. So I continued to volunteer to give haircuts to the residents in Cathy's unit for several years, one Sunday a month. Sometimes I took my children with me. We adopted a woman named Sylvia, who was 43. I went to cut the residents' hair. We took her to lunch, and I would bring her things, coloring books and dolls, and she was a skilled con artist. She found me an easy mark. Sylvia was a very important person in our lives. But the gifts I gave far outweighed the gifts I received far outweighed my efforts. I really enjoyed crafting styles for them, and they made me feel like a hero. So one afternoon, after a long, tiring day of haircuts, I was looking forward to an hour-long solitude of driving home in the countryside. But they brought me one more client who needed a haircut. My heart sank. I wanted to go home, but as she walked towards me, I thought, oh my God, I don't think I can fix that hair. And can she sit still long enough? She didn't even want a haircut. I just had to dig into my weary being and muster up the willingness to see it differently. In other words, I prayed like crazy and reminded myself that she was beloved and as perfect to God as anyone. This was another phrase I remembered from my Christian Science Sunday school, God's perfect child. Everyone is God's perfect child. So much to my amazement, underneath that dry, frizzy mop, which just like a fright wig, was hiding this abundantly beautiful head of natural curly hair. Someone had given her a permanent wave and ruined her hair. It had grown out in the shape of a wild, monstrous Brillo pad. And as I was cutting away and sculpting and crafting, a transformation was taking place in her and in me. And I kept saying, oh, I was so excited. Oh, you are gonna be so beautiful. And when I finished, she was so happy. She felt like a movie star. And that same shining love and light that I had seen in that old man, I found in her. She was beautiful. And of course, you know, that light and love had always been there, but my fear prevented me from being able to see it. So, yes, Daddy, God doesn't make a mistake. The Father doesn't make a mistake. We make a mistake. when we fail to recognize the inherent worth and dignity of beauty of every person. I had found a theology adequate for the night, a theology just right for my life's journey. The voice of God is in the uniqueness of each and every person, which is a Jewish midrash. Love is a choice. God, or whatever name you use for the holy or not, is truly found in the eyes of all of us. It just requires the willingness for us to see. As the Deuteronomist said, choose life. Even when the evidence is grim, even when the going gets tough, choose life and choose love. So after years of wandering in the wilderness and not fitting in anywhere, in any traditional religious community, I finally found the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Clemson, South Carolina. It was an epiphany to find a faith tradition that didn't expect me to put my intellect, my doubts, my questions in my pocket. UUs or SEAMs are the best kept secret out there. I was almost 40 when I found them. From there, my journey led me to Alaska. I had a call to feed people, which is where I discovered that owning a bakery is no way to live. And my call to feed people was actually a call to ministry. And then I went to Berkeley, California, to seminary. And that's when I met the Faithful Fools, and that's a whole story for a whole nother time. So I am your new interim minister. My job is to not be Joan. My job is to not be perfect. And just want you to say that my theology now is that I believe that a better world is possible when we are willing to see the love and perfection and inherent dignity of every person, even when it's hard. And I want you to know that I feel honored to be with you during this transition. Our life-giving, life-saving Unitarian Universalist faith is needed now more than ever, and I'm grateful to be here walking that journey with you. Thank you. And so we have another hymn. Thank you. And questions about my life are fair game during the interim process questioning, but mainly you're supposed to ask about the interim process. So what hymn are we singing? Amazing Grace. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 205, Amazing Grace.
please remain standing as we say our words for extinguishing the chalice. As we extinguish the flame of this chalice, may we carry its light with us into the world in the power of peace, faith, justice, and love.
These words are by Reverend Andrew Pecula. There are miles behind you and many more ahead. As you journey on toward wholeness, may all that is good and true guide your way. May the joy of love lighten your step, and the miracle that is life be ever in your sight. And remember, you are blessed, you are a blessing, and above all, remember that you are not alone. You are never alone. So be it. Blessed be. And let the church say, Amen.
He was quite a charismatic teacher, but also probably a teacher who ultimately abused his students in ways by just exercising